It's hard to say. Fun fact, every time I type entrepreneur, it's incorrect. I don't know why it's so difficult. And I'm always looking for the correction from the typing thing, like the computer to be like, no, this is how you say it. And I'm like, all right, cool. Thanks, computer.
I'm Chaz Chambers, a musician and social entrepreneur living as a digital nomad and traveling the world. I've been playing drums since I was 5 years old. My instrument has allowed me the opportunity to play on cruise ships and even live on a circus train. I currently operate a successful niche travel agency that does small group music and cultural tours to Cuba, Brazil, Spain, and more. This podcast is about social consciousness in the business world. It is a journey to uncover new ways of doing business and augmenting capitalism and socialism, and maybe see if they could have a baby together.
Social entrepreneurialism. What is it? What does it mean? A lot of folks know what entrepreneurialism is, or to be an entrepreneur, they know what an entrepreneur is. Mostly someone who starts a business. That's probably the simplest way, or starts an enterprise, or starts something. Someone who innovates a way to do something, creates something. We would say an innovator, but we also say entrepreneur if it has to do with business, right? So if you're like someone who's getting in business to create something, do something, start a new business, it seems like some people have taken that word entrepreneur and stretched it. So there's so many different ways to define something, and we seem to forget about the root words, right? So social entrepreneurialism, I'll just read a basic definition that I kind of translated myself, but there's a few out there on Google if you want to look it up. Social entrepreneurialism is a pursuit of positive social solutions by individuals, groups, or other entities. Now, I've heard some debate out there whether like a nonprofit is a social entrepreneurial endeavor. I think so, but I think people associate entrepreneur with capitalism in the sense that, like, if you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to make money. So I don't think it has to be that 100%. That's the great thing about philosophy, is we can kind of dream of, like, we have words to describe things like entrepreneur, right? Socialism, things like that. But we also have philosophy that helps us expand our imagination on what something could be. And I think that's what a lot of this podcast is going to be about. But when we take social entrepreneurialism, I think we can really, just like you would if you started a business, right? You're going to sit there and brainstorm about business ideas, like what can I create, what can I sell, what can I, anything. What is your business idea? In that same process, we're going to be like, what is a business idea that not just makes money, but affects something in the world, affects a group of people, affects something that affects people. Like environmentalism. If you were to start something, a business that was good for negating the effects of climate change. That's something that I've seen a lot of, actually, especially if you were to see the documentaries. I believe it's called Social Entrepreneur or Social Entrepreneurialism. I'll post it in the description on this video, but it's a really great documentary. I highly recommend it. But those are some great examples of social entrepreneurs, and a lot of them are doing some really cool stuff. I remember one lady, she was selling socks, and then every time she would sell a pair of socks, she would give another pair of socks to a homeless person. In general, someone who is way less fortunate than we are, and maybe it's not, we kind of take that for granted. I can go to the store and I can buy like a 10-pack of socks, but some folks can't, it's just not a top priority, So that business is making social change. Yeah, it's small, but the thing is there's so many people out there talking about entrepreneurialism, starting a business, talking about markets, talking about, what's the trends, what can make the most money, stuff like that. But they're not talking about what makes the most change. How can we combine the two, right? How can we combine, our need to live and have a little bit of money, right? Because that's just the environment we're in. We're not talking about the evolution of what things could be. We're not living in some sort of utopian, we're not living in our imaginations. We in the reality that we live in, you know, especially for the United States or any other, you know, neoliberal capitalist economy, you got to go out and work. I mean, unless you're a trust fund baby, they don't really have to work, but the working class has to work. We have to go out there and start a business, or we have to go work for somebody, So, I mean, there's a lot of different options and things to do for some people. Some people there's not, because they're not really. We're not going to get into that right now, but you know, uh, different levels of equality for people who can and can't start businesses. And I think one of the goals of this podcast is to tell you how you can do it. So I think that when we're talking about social entrepreneurialism, we're talking about any endeavor that brings some sort of social change. And that's pretty simple. It means you can make money. I've heard some arguments out there that say that nonprofits are not social entrepreneurialism because they don't technically make a profit. I don't know. I don't think that matters. I just want people to know in the business world. I think people think that the only way that they can do this sort of philanthropic type of endeavor is to be a nonprofit, and that's not true. I think you can wake up every day, and you can have a business, and you can work on something that brings social change. And I think that's actually what entrepreneurs should be focused on. I mean, a lot of times in business school, I took an entrepreneurial class at the little online free Harvard thing. That was really cool. It was talking about entrepreneurialism in developing countries, and it was talking about problem solving. I was like, that's cool. I mean, yeah, maybe it was talking about something in Africa, like bringing like data services and bringing internet services so that lower income African communities can have phone service and stuff like that. So that's a great idea. We need to do that, right? They need infrastructure. They need to be able to connect to the internet, right? But the thing is, this is where a social entrepreneur asks a question, right? Like, am I going to do this? Am I going to go build a bunch of stuff in Africa? Am I going to go build towers, like 5G towers, and give internet, and then also like just do it to enrich myself? I mean, is that the goal? For some people it is. Some people wake up and they just dream of like a Rolex. They dream of like a nice car. They dream of a really nice house. I'm not saying you can't have a nice house. I don't think you really need a Rolex or a nice car, but that's my opinion. But in general, when you set out to do one of these endeavors, you may have good intentions. You may say, "Hey, I want to help build infrastructure in Africa so that people can have access to internet and phone services." That's great. But like when you start hiring people, what is your practice as far as making sure that you're not exploiting your workers? I think some people forget that part, because and this is a great point that I kind of wrote down here that I think that I kind of live by, and I think that's something that should be maybe put in some sort of code somewhere of like golden rules of social entrepreneurs. It is uh, basically saying if a company exploits its workers, it is not an example of social entrepreneurship, regardless of any philanthropy. So I think that, and that's also kind of a thing we see with like the super rich class, is they like to pawn off their conscience to philanthropy. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm sure that these charity organizations are giving money to great causes. There's a lot of great nonprofits and organizations out there. This is not to diss them at all. This is saying when you get in business and you create a business that's for profit, right? This isn't like, okay, I'm gonna start a business that's for profit, and then like I'm just gonna give 10% of the money to my church, and that's my giving back. That's my social cause, right? I'm gonna give 10% to a charity that feeds homeless people. That's great. You should do that. You should still do that. But I think it's more of like a systemic thing, right? It starts in our head, and like our values, right? And our morals of who we are as people and what we expect from other people, right? You know, if you can't afford to pay somebody, you maybe shouldn't hire people. you know? And that brings me to another point that I had on here that says, I wrote this out, so I'm going to read it. The most ideal type of business is one that you can do by yourself. By yourself. And that's not possible in a lot of different things like certain manufacturing and production. And that kind of interrelates to another concept that's very popular and becoming even more popular, which is cooperatives and worker cooperatives. But we're going to keep that for another episode. As far as being a social entrepreneur, getting something started, part of being a social entrepreneur is not exploiting your workers. So if you start a business, you want to start a business, what can you do by yourself? A lot of times you can, and actually this is more possible today than it probably was 50 years ago, though that this has existed in this fashion by just working by yourself. I'm not saying you can't have a team or you can't hire contractors or you can't pay an artist or a designer to make you like a logo, stuff like that, right? Like that's part of something you can't do, and that's hiring someone who's working on their business, right? Someone who's a graphic designer, they charge $150 to create a logo. You're supporting that other small business and their enterprise, right? So the internet, the main thing here is that the internet makes it possible for someone to start a business by themselves. I really think that this new age of technology and computers and automation and robots allows for some ethical types of exploitation, right? I think that you can exploit robots. I think that you can exploit your computer. That's what we do all the time. We use our computer. It works with us, right? We're not hurting any humans, right? I mean, you could get into this long argument about how it was made and stuff like that, but we're not going to get into that right now. We're going to get into like, hey, I have an iPad right here that I'm reading my notes on, and it's working for me, right? It's doing some work that I don't have to do. I don't have to remember to say all these things in this video because my iPad says it for me, right? Automation is really cool where you can develop algorithms and you can develop processes that automatically do things when another thing happens. If one action happens, then another action happens. It's kind of the idea of assembly line, right? It's like, okay, the car is coming down, I put the wheel on. Well, now there's robots doing that. And I know we can make a lot of different things about people losing their jobs and stuff like that. I promise I will get into that in another episode because there's really a lot to uncover there. But as a social entrepreneur, being a social entrepreneur, having the ideas, right? Being socially conscious of what the ideas may be, I think is the first step. We can all sit here and brainstorm about, okay, I have this business idea. I want to start a food truck. Okay, well, how does it help the community? Right? If you're gonna go and ask for a profit from a community, you should have something to give back to them. I don't know what that is all the time, but that's something that's something we should be thinking about, if not more, at least as much as profit and money. Right? It's like at the end of the day, if I make $100, I also need to think like, I made 100. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of money here, right? We're talking about whatever. You made $100 because you started a business. The same time the other time that you spent trying to figure out how to make that $100, you're also equally spending time thinking of like, how do I not take it? How do I give back to this community? How do I negate the effects of climate change? How do I make sure that if I grow and have workers that they're taken care of and they get good wages, and that we have good standards for equality within the business, where the person at the top doesn't make too much more than the person at the bottom. There's a lot of great examples happening out there for that, and I mean, there's a lot of stuff to be said about a business that is socially conscious. I mean, in general, it's good for your business, right? Because if you put it out there and people know that you're authentic, you're not just saying like, "Hey, I want to help get plastic out of the ocean," right? If people know you actually do that, I mean, yeah, there's probably got to be some documentation that, some video or something showing you doing that. And you're not just doing it for the publicity, but if people know that you're authentic about that, that's a good business thing, right? Because people will want to do business with somebody who is socially conscious. There's a lot of businesses I think of that over the years that I've stopped doing business with because I don't agree with their labor practices. I don't agree with where they source their items, or like where those items, how those items may have been manufactured, things like that. So when you do business with somebody, or when you come up with an idea and you think, "Hey, why would someone want to do business with me?" Well, because your business is socially woke. That's why.